Folks, welcome back to RGR Football. This is going to be fun. I hope that you're liked and subbed in the whole 9 yards, because if not, you're not going to hear Matt Derrick every week, but he's back. How are you, Matt?
I am doing well, and I'm liked and subbed, so
okay,
be like me.
That way you can see yourself, and then that's always...
I can't see I enjoy those notifications.
Right? Hey, it's fun. Hey, look, Matt showed up today. We're going to take it easy because this is a Sunday that we're going to follow up from when Matt was here earlier in the week. And I just want to think a little bit farther down the road, what we were talking about, like the fatigue that some of the older players on this roster are going to feel. And the fact that there are a couple of new coaches in places, a couple of coaches that have kind of switched roles as well. Like when we talk about the way they've at least told us so far that camp's going to be every day at 9:15, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see like the coaching staff taking a different tact on how much work they do, how much grind they do, particularly on the older guys, but probably as the roster in general this season?
Yeah, I'm curious about it because, and I'm glad you brought up, the 9:15 thing, because, that, we're still expecting that a lot of the practices are probably going to run about 2:30, 2:40. I mean, that's kind of what they're allowed to be. So it probably won't make a huge change. There's still going to be a few practices. I mean, there's going to have some, especially those acclimation practices. If you're going out to training camp, first 3 or 4 workouts, those are going to be some short, non-contact workouts. I mean, you're going to be out there for maybe 90 minutes and see some flag football because they've got a ramp up period this year. It's once you get into those 5th and 6th public practices that things will get a little bit more lively and you'll start seeing the hitting. But yeah, I mean, there's some things with the CBA that they've got to restructure a little bit about how they run these practices. But, we've talked about the drain on this team. And even though Andy Reid has a reputation as running one of the hardest training camps in business, I think we have seen over the last couple of seasons that he's a little bit more, inclined to make things a little bit easier on some guys. This year we even saw, he canceled the last practice of OTAs because that was their conditioning test. So he didn't make them practice and condition in the heat in Kansas City on the same day. It seems like, and we even saw Patrick Mahomes took a day off to go have a fundraising golf tournament for his organization in Hawaii. I mean, Andy Reid just seems to be a little bit more chill with all that kind of stuff. So I can see that maybe he's softening in his old age a little bit, but he probably still runs one of the toughest training camps in the league.
I always think of Andy Reid in one of two ways, either that red pullover that he wears all season long or the Hawaiian shirt. And it seems like Hawaiian Andy is like running OTA so far, taking it a little bit more relaxed on everybody. I'll be interested to see in particular if they just give guys rest. You have to get snaps, but does Jaron Reed have to be out there all practice long with the ones, right? Do we see more rotation? Because I think one of the key things, we touched on it this week on Locked On as well, that with the only 3 preseason games, like I think need more practice reps from the young guys that might be on the bottom of the roster, might be a prime substitute or something, in order to evaluate them, because you won't have that extra game film.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting case and point, because during OTAs, it seemed like we saw, I feel like maybe a little bit more rotation than in past OTA periods. I mean, once again, we don't get the same access. There's only 3 sessions that are opened up compared to a few years ago when we got to see all 10 OTAs. But it seemed like there was a little bit more rotation, and one really curious one, and this certainly could have been due to Patrick Mahomes with the toe and them wanting to back off of him a little bit. But they were, having Chad Henne come in, for a couple of reps during the ones, and then Mahomes come back in. I mean, that's something that typically with, their quarterback rotation, the ones takes all the reps with the ones, the twos takes all the reps with the twos, and never the twain shall meet. But we saw a little bit more of, Henne getting some work and Mahomes getting a little bit less. Like I said, that could have been due to, wanting to take things easy on that toe. But if that continues into the training camp, I mean, I think that probably does extend to exactly what you're talking about, is trying to find a way to get, some young players more reps, to get back off a little bit of the veterans. There's going to be some guys that are going to be difficult to get off the field. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu, it's hard to pull off the field. I mean, you're going to have to drag him off the practice field. But there's a lot of players in this team that they need to, one, evaluate, and two, work with at every position. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they juggle the workload, especially with evaluating everything that they need to on the offensive and defensive lines, working in some of this rookie draft class and giving them their opportunities. It's going to be interesting, and how they manage to work with some of these veterans as well, because I think there's some vets that, could definitely benefit from less work right now this time of year.
Mm-hmm. There's two positions that stand out to me that really need as heavy a rotation as they can possibly get, and for vastly different reasons, in my opinion, but I want your take on them. First of all, wide receiver, because there's like 1,700 of them in camp, but a little bit more so because not only do they have to find someone to really take a step forward to claim a starting spot with Hill and Hardman, but I also wonder if it's Blamire getting his teeth into the position, being able to extract maybe a little bit something different that in his eyes is what he's trying to coach the position at, than maybe what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, there's three coaches that are either in new additions or new positions that I'm really curious to see how they do shake out. And Joe Blamire is one of them, because there's no doubt he's bringing a different approach to that running back position or that wide receiver position. I mean, Joe was a wide receiver in college, so it's not like he's brand new to the position group or anything. But his path through becoming a position coach came through the film room. It came through analytics and analysis. And that's what I'm really curious about, because, whereas Greg Lewis was a lot more hands-on, a lot more technique, it really seems like a lot of, what Blamire is going to be working with these guys on is recognition, seeing patterns, seeing what shows up on film, how they can utilize that in games. And then at the same time, you got Greg Lewis moving to the running back position. And I think he's going to be exactly that in the running back room. I mean, not that he can't, hey, good football guys can coach any position. But there's no doubt Greg Lewis is a really good coach at teaching technique and route running, and those are all things that can benefit that running back room, whether it's out of the backfield or whether having them split out. I mean, I think those are two really interesting position changes on the offensive group that I think are really interesting to see how they work in training camp and what kind of the results they get this year are.
Yeah, I think McKinnon and Clyde are two prime candidates for splitting out. I think that's going to be great to see. You nailed two of them. The other one for me is imperative to get rotation for completely opposite, because I think they're hunting for talent. I think they're hunting for guys that can put in reps and be successful. And I wonder if there's one guy on this staff that might have the tallest order right now to sort out his depth chart, I think it might be Sam Madison, just trying to figure out who can step up and play those meaningful reps, particularly in the slot. I think that's probably Fenton's job to lose at this point. But who can sub when there's an injury? Who can come in? Because I think beyond the starting three, it's a lot of question marks right now. And how do you feel about where Sam Madison is, what he may have to do to expand what he knows in order to set his depth chart?
Yeah, and you talk about even the starting three. I mean, there's some questions with the starting three. I mean, you're definitely thinking that L'Jarius Sneed is everything he was last year, and you're thinking he's going to make a step forward. But Chiefs are going to ask a lot from him this year. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, if OTAs were any indication, you're going to see L'Jarius Sneed playing everywhere, inside, outside. I mean, he's not going to have necessarily a defined role other than he's their number one corner that's going to be everywhere. Traverse Ward has been somewhat at times an inconsistent performer. He's played really well. He's had some bad moments too. He's had some injuries. Which Traverse Ward are you going to get the full season? I mean, that's a question mark. Rashad Fenton looked really, really good last year in limited opportunities, but if he's playing a bigger role this year, what is he? And then you're right. After that, there are question marks up and down that roster. So yeah, I'm really curious how the Chiefs what they're going to be able to get out of that position this year, because if their bets don't hit, if bets on DeAndre Baker and Mike Hughes and Bo Pete Keys don't hit, what are they going to have? I mean, to me, it's a real mystery, and there's questions up and down. And at the same time, the Chiefs haven't really made any moves towards trying to bring any veteran help. And I'm not sure that at this point there's anybody out there they feel like could be, a key addition to this group at this point. I mean, I think that if you're looking for outside help, you're probably waiting once again, like we talked about, until end of training camp, beginning of the season, if there's going to be anybody coming from outside the organization.
Yeah, looking for a cut down candidate, a veteran that just couldn't keep up with the young guys on that roster. For me, it becomes, if there's one position group on this roster right now that I think a UDFA might have a shot at competing, it's probably the corner group. But from a coach's perspective, I know we don't know a lot about Sam Madison. Like we haven't. I feel like he's probably the least exposed of this staff of all the coaches that we've gotten press wise over the years or whatever. It just seems to me like he's got the tallest order, and they didn't bring in. Ken Flagel is working with linebackers, is not going to get support there. Like he has to really set his mentality with Steve Spagnuolo and Dave Merritt, of course. But I feel like that is the tallest order right now. And if there's anywhere else, it might be defensive end or it might be wide receiver on offense. But that's really, I think, what I'm most concerned about going into this camp is that corner room. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, and you even mentioned, helping out from other places. I mean, it's whether it's just because of the players that he's got or it's an interest that Steve Spagnuolo has. It seems like he works with safeties almost more than anybody else on the field. I mean, he seems to love his Juan Thornhills and his Tyrann Matthews and everything. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot on Sam Madison and Dave Merritt to see what they can squeeze out of that cornerback group. And because once again, I mean, it's also a position that you look at everything else and outside of the, a draft pick investment on L'Jarius Sneed and a few other low round picks, they haven't put a lot of resources into that position. It's not a big cap hit space. It's not where they've gone in free agency. Really haven't made aggressive trades. I mean, it's been picking up guys like, hey, Traverse Ward was a good, bold move that's paid off for them. But otherwise, DeAndre Bakers and the Mike Hugheses are just kind of, gambles that have fumbled into their lap to a degree. I mean, those aren't necessarily bold moves. I mean, they were low cost effective moves, but they haven't paid off yet either. So yeah, that's a group that could go a lot of different directions, but the success of that cornerback group, unfortunately, I mean, it's going to depend on what happens elsewhere because the Chiefs have a cornerback group that's dependent on getting pressure up front. And if the Chiefs don't get pressure up front, that group could get exposed in a hurry.
Yeah, like for me, it seems like when the front office goes shopping, it's henhouse for the front seven, and it's Aldi for the defensive backfield. Just
hey, they'll probably pay a ton for Tyrann Matthew. They gave him a little money to come in, but
there's one.
That's one.
There's one that isn't a low end free agent or a draft pick. So, hey, and if that's what it is, if he happens to be the guy that's running not only your secondary, but quite frankly, the bulk of the defense, if he's your emotional leader, it makes sense to invest in the one and try to keep, in terms of positional cost, down, and then supplement like they are. They clearly seem to be, in my opinion, emphasizing safety play over corner play, and then that still jives with you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it's, as critical as it sounds like I'm being of the corner position, I still have to say it the other way too, which is that, this cornerback room is a lot better than it was 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. Because even with as many questions as they have, I mean, it would take some significant injuries before you could see anybody coming in off the street and starting for this team at cornerback. I mean, they've got the players that they want. This isn't like Orlando Scandrick would be able to walk into this room right now and start in August. I mean, that's not happening. That's not where they are. So they're better off than they were a few years ago, but it's a boomer bust position. I mean, if all their bets hit, this could be a really, really good secondary. If they all fail, there's going to be some rough moments.
If they have to cover 6 seconds, I think there's going to be some issues.
There could be.
Okay. Well, we'll tell you how it really is, whether you guys like it or not. Thank you for watching today, Matt. Thanks for being with us as always.
Always a pleasure, man.
Folks, thanks for watching RGR Football. Be back, like, sub, do the stuff. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.